They took the toast first. Then they took the silence after it and gave it to my brother, too. 11 relatives laughed at me that night. My mother laughed loudest. I did not cry. I did not correct him. I picked up my water glass. I smiled. 6 weeks earlier, I had bought the note on the house we were all sitting in. None of them knew it yet. They would, just not that night. A woman holding the paper on her parents' house doesn't need to raise her voice at dinner. She only needs the second dinner. And there would be a second dinner. My brother just didn't know it was coming. He didn't know why. He didn't know his own signature would be the thing that called it. But let me take you back to where it actually started. My brother stood up at the head of my parents' anniversary table, tapped his glass with a butter knife, and said, "Let's hear it for Dana," still playing accountant in that little office while the rest of us build something real. My name is Dana Whitfield Reyes. I was 33 years old that night. I did not cry. I did not correct him. I let him have his toast. I let my father clap him on the shoulder. I drove home to Depot Street. I locked a folder in a drawer. I went to bed early. But first, you should know how a woman ends up holding a note on the house she grew up in. I run Reyes Ledger Services out of a converted laundromat on Depot Street, Corbin Falls, Kentucky. 6,000 people tucked in the hills above the Cumberland. The courthouse, the diner, and First Ridge Bank sit close together. Your business is common knowledge by Tuesday, if it happens on a Monday. I kept the old washer hookups capped under the floor. Tearing them out cost $400 more than the landlord wanted to spend. I never minded. It's a plain room, a desk, 2 client chairs, a filing cabinet that locks, and a photograph of my grandmother, Opal Whitfield. In front of Whitfield Hardware, 1974, a ledger book under her arm, like it was a Bible. The morning of that dinner, I had a client in my chair before 9. Ruben Castillo runs a small engine shop on Route 25. He handed me a shoebox of receipts, the way most of my clients do. Like it embarrassed him. I went through 6 months of it in under 20 minutes. I found a $61.40 gap between what his card machine said he took in and what he'd actually deposited. He hadn't caught it. His wife hadn't caught it. I caught it before he finished his coffee. "How do you even see that?" he said. "I don't get loud," I told him. "I get accurate. That's the whole of what I do. It's the whole of who I am." For most of my life, my family treated it like an apology, not a skill. My brother Colt is 36, 3 years older than me. He calls himself a real estate investor. In Corbin Falls, that means he flips houses 2 counties over. He drives a truck worth more than anything he's ever put in a retirement account. Growing up, Colt got the room with the window facing the ridge. I got the one facing the driveway. Colt got praised for closing a deal. I got praised for keeping busy with your little numbers. My mother has said that sentence to me at least once a year since I was 22. I didn't hate my family for it. That's not this kind of story. I loved my parents. I still do. But love and being seen are 2 different accounts. Mine had run a deficit for a decade. I'd stopped expecting it to balance. Here is something you should know before I go further. I was always the one who balanced my parents' checkbook. Since I was 23, every spring, my mother handed me a grocery bag of paper statements. "Can you just look this over, honey?" she'd say. "Your father's terrible with it." I would sort through months of overdraft fees, double payments. One year, a forgotten timeshare payment, $11 a month, drafting 6 years past the timeshare's own foreclosure. I never charged them. I never mentioned it at dinner. I filed it under things a daughter does. I never once called it currency. Not until the year everything changed. Which is the year I'm telling you about now. Here's what neither of them knew that night, while Colt toasted his own cleverness in a house he didn't actually own the roof of anymore. There was a folder in my desk drawer on Depot Street. Locked. It named me the holder of record on the Whitfield house on Persimmon Ridge Road. Not my brother. Not my parents. Not anymore. Not in the way a bank counts it. Me. It happened because my brother had been bleeding money for 2 years. He decided the fastest fix was a second mortgage on our parents' house. He called it a bridge loan. Then he let that bridge fall into the river. He told everyone, including me, he was handling Mom and Dad's finances now. 8 weeks from that dinner, that same easy smile would freeze solid at the exact same table, waiting on an explanation that was never going to land the way he wanted. But that's later. Let me take you back 6 weeks to the day the letter came. My mother called me on a Tuesday afternoon. That was unusual. She calls on Sundays, after church, to tell me things I hadn't asked about. This was a Tuesday. Her voice had a thin, worried thread in it I hadn't heard in years. "There's a letter here," she said. "From the bank. Something about a notice of default. It must be a mistake. Your father and I don't have any loans besides the regular mortgage, and that's been paid down for years." I sat very still, the way I do when a client's numbers don't add up, and I already suspect why. "What bank?" I said. "First Ridge," she said. "The one on Main. You know Ellen, from church." I knew Ellen. Ellen Marsh had been the loan officer at First Ridge for 31 years. She knew our family since before I could walk. She's the kind of woman who remembers your grandmother's maiden name and exactly how much you borrowed for your first car. In a town like Corbin Falls, a good loan officer is half banker, half historian. "Just bring me the letter, Mom," I said. "I'll look it over Sunday. I want to tell you I was calm because I already suspected Colt. I wasn't. Not yet. I was calm because that's simply what I am. The way some people are tall or left-handed. My calm isn't a performance. It's the only voice I've got." But something in my stomach had already gone tight and cold. The particular cold of a column that doesn't balance, long before I had one fact to explain it. Sit with that for a second. It matters to the rest of the story. I am not a woman who explodes. I have never once, in 33 years, raised my voice at my mother, my father, or my brother. Not even the year Colt let the air out of my bike tires because I'd beaten him in a spelling bee. Not even the year he told a girl I liked that I wasn't really into boys, just spreadsheets. Cruel and untrue. I have always answered heat with stillness. It isn't weakness. It's a strategy. I built it on purpose, the same way I built my client list, one careful decision at a time. So on that Tuesday, I didn't call Colt. I didn't call my father. I opened my laptop. I pulled up the county recorder's public portal. Anyone can search it for free if they know the parcel number. I knew it. I'd filed my parents' property taxes since 2019. I typed in the address on Persimmon Ridge Road, and there it was, a second mortgage, recorded 14 months earlier, $310,000, secured against my parents' house, signed by both my parents, co-signed as guarantor by Colton R. Whitfield. I looked at that number for a long time. $310,000 is not a small bridge loan. It is not just something to get me through to closing on the Beecham Street flip. That's the phrase Colt used with my father. My mother told me that later, at her own kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a coffee she never drank. $310,000 is most of what that house is worth. It's my father's 31 years teaching shop class. It's my mother's 22 years doing the books at the elementary school. It's everything. I thought of my grandmother before I called anyone living. That sounds strange. It's exactly what happened. I sat there, the recorder's page glowing on my screen. And I thought about Opal Whitfield, 40 years running the books at Whitfield Hardware on Main Street. She let me sit on a wooden stool behind the counter when I was 7. I'd lick my thumb the way she did before she turned a ledger page. Opal was the only person in my family who ever told me my numbers were a gift, not a consolation prize. Whoever holds the paper holds the house, she told me once. I was maybe 15, watching her close the store's books for the night. Don't ever forget who's holding yours. I didn't understand it then. I understood it completely, sitting at my desk that Tuesday, looking at a name I didn't yet recognize as the holder of record on my parents' note. I need to plant something here. It matters later. There was a folder Opal left me when she died, 4 years before that Tuesday. Everyone assumed it was sentimental, old photographs, a little costume jewelry nobody wanted. What it actually held was $11,300 in a savings account nobody else in the family remembered, plus a letter in her handwriting, 6 words on the envelope. For when you need it. I had never touched it. I didn't know, sitting at my desk that Tuesday, what was coming. In 6 weeks, I'd spend every dollar of it. The smartest thing I ever did with her money. That's the seed. I won't tell you yet what it grew into. I'll tell you what happened first. That's how I lived it. You deserve the same order. I called Ellen Marsh the next morning. Ellen's office sits on the second floor of First Ridge, above the teller line. A window looks out on Main Street and the old Five and Dime that's been a vape shop since 2016. She's 61, silver-haired, reading glasses on a beaded chain. She has never once, in the years I've known her, raised her voice either. I think that's part of why we get along. "Dana," she said when I sat down, "I wondered when you'd call." "You knew," I said. "I flagged the file the day it crossed my desk," she said. 14 months ago. I couldn't tell you then. Regulations. I can tell you some now. The note's in default. Default changes what I'm allowed to say to a family member asking direct questions about a public record. She slid a folder across her desk, the way I'd slide one across mine. "Your brother came in 14 months ago," she said, "with your parents. Told them this was a short bridge. 90 days, tops, to get him through the Beecham Street closing. Your father signed. Your mother signed. Colt signed as guarantor. That's a fancy word for promising the bank he'd cover it, if it went sideways." "Did he cover it?" I said. I already knew. I'd seen the default notice the night before. "He's paid nothing in 4 months," Ellen said. "Not $1. He told your parents as recently as 3 weeks ago when your mother asked that he was handling it." Something quiet and final settled into me. Not rage. Rage is easy to talk about, and it isn't what I felt. It was closer to what you feel when a client hands you a shoebox. You already know, before you open it, the math is worse than they think. A kind of grim, steady readiness. "What happens if it stays in default?" I said. "The bank can sell the note to a distressed debt buyer, or move toward foreclosure," Ellen said. "Given the amount, I'd guess the workout desk sells it before it gets that far." Selling a defaulted note at a discount is cleaner for everyone than foreclosing on a 68-year-old shop teacher and his wife. "How much of a discount?" I said. Ellen looked at me a long moment over her glasses. The look she gives right before she decides whether to say something she isn't strictly required to say. "If I were advising a family member with the nerve to move fast and quiet," she said, "here's what I'd tell her. The workout desk lets a note like this go for 65 cents on the dollar to clear it off the books before quarter end." I'd also tell her that anyone can buy a note from a bank's distressed desk, Dana. It isn't illegal. It isn't even unusual. Investors do it constantly. It just takes cash, patience, and a closing. I did the math before I left her office. 310,000 at 65 cents on the dollar is $201,500. I did not have $201,500. I had $11,300 sitting in an account with Opal's handwriting on an envelope. And I had a business. 11 years of it. Something Colt never once asked me a single question about. Reyes Ledger Services turned a profit of $84,000 the year before that Tuesday. I don't spend much. I bought my house on Willow Lane 6 years ago for $138,000 and paid it off 2 years early. On purpose. I have never once believed a person is safe until the number behind them is zero. By the following week, I had it. Opal's 11,300, 40,000 from my own savings. $150,000 line of credit, structured entirely within the rules through a workout desk buyers program. First Ridge uses for exactly this. $201,500. It's easy to picture this as dramatic. It wasn't. There was no thunderclap. I sat in a small conference room at First Ridge on a Thursday afternoon, across from a notary and a woman from the distressed debt desk who'd driven up from Lexington. I signed my name 4 times. I initialed 11 pages. At the end of it, a woman I'd never met slid one recorded document across the table. "Congratulations, Ms. Reyes. You're now the holder of record." I drove home with that document on the passenger seat. Like it was a sleeping animal I didn't want to wake. That was 6 weeks before the anniversary dinner. 6 weeks of Sunday calls. My mother mentioning, in passing, that Colt had found a way to handle things. She was so relieved. She didn't have to think about the letter anymore. 6 weeks of watching my brother post pictures from a rented lake house, captioned "Investing in Memories." I sat in my office on Depot Street, holding the proof. He'd put our parents' home at risk to cover his own failing flips and lied to their faces about fixing it. 6 weeks of biting my tongue. At a dinner where my brother stood up with a butter knife, told a room of relatives I was still playing accountant. I let him have that dinner. I want you to understand why. It's the whole shape of who I am. I didn't stay quiet because I was scared of him. I stayed quiet because I don't move until the numbers are airtight, and on the night of that toast, they weren't. Not yet. I needed one more piece, not to prove the mortgage existed. I had that. I needed to know how deep Colt's other flips had sunk. A woman who holds a note on one defaulted loan and stops there. She's patched a single leak in a house sinking from 4. I didn't build 11 years of careful work to patch one hole and call it done. So I smiled at that dinner. I clapped for my brother's toast. The next morning, I went back to work. Let me back up a little more. To the anniversary dinner itself. I skipped past most of it to get to the note. But the fuller picture matters. It shows exactly what that toast cost me, and what it was worth pretending it hadn't. My parents hosted every year at the house on Persimmon Ridge Road. Same dinner. Same 11 or 12 relatives. Same white tablecloth my mother irons that morning. Every single time, though nobody but her has ever once commented on it. That year, it was 40 years married. A slightly bigger cake. My mother in the blue dress she wears for occasions she considers important. My father in the collared shirt he only takes out of the closet twice a year. I arrived at 6, same as always. A bottle of wine I'd picked out carefully. A Cabernet from a small Kentucky vineyard my mother likes. Even on a night I already suspected something was wrong in that house, I wasn't going to show up empty-handed. That's not who I am. I don't let one grievance cancel out another obligation. Colt arrived 20 minutes after me, with Brienne. In the truck I mentioned, the one that costs more than most people's first house. He came in loud, the way he always does, hugging our mother, shaking our father's hand like they were closing a deal. Notice something about that. It's a piece of the picture that matters. Colt has always entered a room like he's already won something in it. I have always entered a room like I'm checking to see if anything needs fixing before I sit down. Dinner itself was ordinary for the first hour. My mother's pot roast, my father's stories about former students who still sent him Christmas cards, decades later. Aunt Renee asking everyone at the table increasingly personal questions about their finances. I've learned over the years that's simply how Renee shows affection. Prying is her love language. I sat between Uncle Marv and a second cousin named Whitney I only see at these events. I ate my dinner. I answered polite questions about the business. The same three, every time. Is it going well? Are you seeing anyone? Don't you get lonely in that little office all day? Those questions used to bother me more than they do now. I've made a kind of peace with being the family member people don't quite know what to do with. The one whose life doesn't fit the shape they expected. No husband, no children yet. A business that sounds small when you say it out loud, even though it pays every bill I've ever had, on time. I've learned to answer those questions the way I answer a client's nervous question about a scary-looking number. Calmly, honestly, without apologizing for a truth that doesn't need one. It was after the cake that Colt stood up. He tapped his glass with a butter knife. The sound cut through Aunt Renee's latest question to Whitney about her rent. The table quieted, the way tables always do for the person who's decided it's his turn. Colt has a way of commanding a room I've never had and never wanted. Easy performance. It makes people lean in, even when what follows isn't worth leaning in for. I just want to say something, he said, about Mom and Dad. 40 years? That's not nothing. A pause. A practiced one. The kind that tells you he'd thought about this moment on the drive over. And I want to say something about family, too. About how we all show up for each other in our own ways. Another pause. Then, looking right at me with that easy smile that's gotten him out of more trouble than he probably realizes, let's hear it for Dana, still playing accountant in that little office, while the rest of us build something real. Here's exactly what that sentence did to the room. I've replayed it enough times to know precisely. 11 relatives laughed, some kindly, the reflexive laugh of people who didn't quite catch the cruelty inside the joke. Some not kindly at all. Aunt Renee's laugh in particular carried an edge I recognized from a lifetime of hearing her enjoy other people's small humiliations. My mother laughed loudest of anyone. I noted that. Filed it away, the way I file away every number that doesn't add up. My father didn't laugh, actually. I want to give him that. He smiled, the polite smile of a man who doesn't want to make a scene at his own anniversary dinner. But his eyes found mine for just a second, something almost apologetic in them. Not quite enough to say anything out loud. I picked up my water glass. I want you to know exactly what I was thinking. It's the truest window into who I am. In this whole story, I wasn't thinking about revenge. I hadn't even closed on the note yet. Not for another 6 weeks. What I was thinking, holding that glass, looking at my brother's easy smile and my mother's uncomplicated laughter, was simply this. None of you have any idea what's actually happening in this family right now. I am the only person at this table who does. That's not triumph. I want to be careful about that distinction. It's the whole heart of who I am. It was closer to loneliness, honestly. The particular loneliness of being the only accurate person in a room full of people confidently wrong about the thing that matters most. I smiled anyway, a small, real smile. Even loneliness, held with enough patience, eventually turns into leverage, if you're willing to wait for it. I clapped for my brother's toast. I meant the clapping, in a strange way. Whatever else Colt is, he is still my brother. 40 years of my parents' marriage is still worth celebrating. even at a table where I'd just been publicly diminished by the person supposedly celebrating it alongside me. I've never believed those two things have to cancel each other out. You can hold a grievance and a genuine well wish in the same two hands. I've done it my whole life. I left a little after 9, hugged my mother at the door, told my father happy anniversary one more time. I did not say a single word to Colt about the toast. Not that night, not for 6 more weeks. I don't do anything until the numbers are airtight. That night, they weren't yet. Not quite. I drove home down Persimmon Ridge Road in the dark, past the same dented guardrail, past the same mailbox shaped like a barn. I didn't cry on that drive either. I turned the radio to the college station out of Lexington, the one that plays old country on Sunday nights, even though it was Saturday. Sometimes a small inconsistency is exactly what a person needs to feel normal again. I drove the rest of the way home with Merle Haggard low on the dial, a locked folder waiting for me at the office, a plan already taking its slow, careful shape. I want to tell you about the folder I kept. It wasn't dramatic either. A manila folder, labeled March, in a filing cabinet that locks. Inside it, copies of everything. The recorded assignment naming me holder of record, Ellen's default notice, my own bank statements, showing the wire transfers dated and clean. I've told clients for 11 years that boring paperwork beats a good story. A judge doesn't care how you felt. A judge cares what's dated, what's signed, what matches. I built that folder the way I build every client file. Airtight, notarized, patient. The week after the closing, I started pulling threads on Colt's other flips. None of it was illegal. None of it required talking to my brother. Property records in Kentucky are public. Lien filings are public. So are UCC filings, the kind a lender records when a business pledges collateral. Searchable through the Secretary of State's office for a small fee. I paid the fee. I searched Colton R. Whitfield and Whitfield Property Solutions, LLC, the name on his business cards. A little gold house icon on the corner. He probably paid $60 for that design. What came back took most of a Saturday to read. By the end, I understood how deep the water was. Colt had 3 active flips outside Corbin Falls, a duplex in Somerset, purchased 14 months earlier for $190,000, financed through a hard money lender at 11% interest, 4 payments behind. A house in London, Kentucky, purchased 11 months earlier for $162,000. A mechanic's lien filed against it. A roofing contractor never paid the $18,000 he was owed for a full tear-off and replacement. And Beecham Street, here in Corbin Falls, the property our parents' second mortgage was supposedly bridging him toward, purchased for $220,000, still unsold 9 months after Colt swore it would flip in 90 days. 3 properties, $572,000 in purchase debt. A hard money lender charging interest that compounds like a slow leak in a tire. A contractor owed $18,000, getting angrier by the week. I could tell from 2 increasingly sharp letters attached to the lien filing, and underneath all of it, a foundation nobody had checked. $310,000 against our parents' house. Personally guaranteed by Colt, unpaid for 4 months. The same month the Somerset duplex went delinquent, too. You didn't need an accounting degree to see the shape of it. Colt wasn't managing 3 flips. Colt was drowning in 3 flips. He'd reached into our parents' equity like a man grabbing a life ring. He told them it was just a loan. He told me nothing at all. I sat with that folder open on my kitchen table for a long time that Saturday night. I thought about my father, 68 years old, 31 years teaching shop class, so other people's kids would know how to change their own oil and frame a wall square. I thought about my mother, 66, 22 years balancing the books at Corbin Falls Elementary, never once a dollar off at semester's end. The same quiet pride I inherited, and she never once called it that. Neither of them had $572,000. Neither of them had ever needed to. They had a paid-down mortgage, a modest pension, and a son who told them he was handling it. Here's the truth about what I felt that night. It matters more than the numbers. I wasn't angry at Colt for needing help. People need help. I'd have helped him myself if he'd asked. Plain and honest, sitting across my desk like any other client with a shoebox of trouble. What I couldn't get past was that he never asked. He took, quietly, from two people who trusted him because he was their son. Then he stood at their table with a butter knife and mocked the sister who'd have caught the whole thing in 20 minutes. If he'd only shown her the shoebox. I didn't tell my parents that Saturday. That's the part people find hardest to believe. I had by then everything I needed. The mortgage, the default, 3 sinking properties. I didn't do it, not to protect Colt. I wasn't finished. A half-told truth in my family gets talked back into a misunderstanding before dinner's even cleared. I've watched it happen before. I needed the reveal to be undeniable, not an argument I'd lose at a kitchen table, not while my mother decided, the way she always has, that Colt just needs a little grace right now. So I waited, and while I waited, the story took a turn I hadn't planned for. It came on a Wednesday, about 3 weeks after the dinner. A phone call from my Aunt Renee, my mother's younger sister. She has never once kept a piece of information to herself for longer than it takes to dial a number. "Dana," she said, the second I picked up. "Did you hear about Colt's flip in London?" "What about it?" I said. Careful. The way I always am when Renee opens with a question instead of the news. "The roofer's suing him," she said. "Filed something with the county. Your mother's beside herself. She thinks it'll hurt Colt's reputation with the bank." I sat very still. Not surprising exactly. What surprised me came next. "And here's the part nobody's saying out loud," Renee said, dropping her voice the way she does when she thinks she's being discreet. "She never has been. Colt told your mother he needs another loan. A short one, he says. Just to get past the roofer thing. He wants to refinance the house again." I had to set my coffee down. "Refinance the house," I said. "Again." "That's what your mother told me," Renee said. She said Colt explained it real careful. Said it was just moving numbers around, nothing to worry about. Said he'd have it all cleared up in a few months, once Beecham Street sells. I thanked Renee. I hung up. I sat at my desk for 5 full minutes without moving. Here's what that call told me. It changed the shape of everything I'd have to do next. Colt wasn't just behind on a bridge loan he'd let lapse into silent default. Colt was going back to the well a second time. On a house he didn't own. That I now legally held the note on. My parents had no idea. The man they trusted to handle it was the same man who'd already put them one missed payment from losing the house. To a stranger from Lexington. A stranger I'd beaten to the closing table by exactly one signature. I want to walk you through what I did next. This is where the seed I'd carried quietly for 6 weeks finally started to grow teeth. First, I called Ellen Marsh. "He wants to refinance," I told her, sitting across her desk again. Same chair. "He came in Monday," Ellen said. "Asked about a second position loan against Persimmon Ridge." I told him truthfully the property already carries a note that would need satisfying first. Any new lender would find that note in a title search within the hour. "Did you tell him who holds it?" I said. "That's public record, Dana," Ellen said, something almost gentle in how she said it, like she was handing me a decision, not a fact. "Anyone can look. He just hasn't looked yet." I sat with that. Colt hadn't checked. 14 months of borrowing against a house he didn't own. 6 weeks of hiding a default from our parents. However many days it took him to work up the nerve to ask for a second loan on top of the first. My brother had never once pulled the title on the house he was gambling with. He assumed it was still Mom and Dad's name on the deed, the way it had always been. He'd never had reason to imagine it different. That gap in his checking was my whole advantage. I decided right there, in that chair, how I'd use it. I wasn't going to call him. I wasn't going to send a letter. I wasn't going to march into my parents' kitchen. I wasn't going to lay the folder on the table over coffee, the way I might have 3 weeks earlier. I decided something calmer, colder, and better, I think, than anything I'd have done in anger. Let him finish trying to refinance a house he no longer controlled. Let the truth land on its own weight, in front of the people whose respect he'd been trading on his whole life. I wasn't building a trap. The plain facts, left alone, were already building one for him. I went back to work. Same calm face I wore at the dinner. 3 more weeks passed. 2 things happened in that time. Let me tell them in order. The first was a text from Colt himself. That surprised me. Colt and I text maybe 4 times a year. Usually holiday plans neither of us starts. "Hey sis," he wrote. "Heard you're doing good with the business. Mom mentioned you might have some room to help out with a short-term thing for me and Dad. Nothing crazy, would mean a lot. Let's grab coffee." I read that message 4 times. Notice what it was. He wasn't asking me directly about money. He was testing the water, the way you tap a frozen pond with one boot first. He started with our mother, hoping she'd soften me up. He didn't know I already held the exact loan he was working around. He thought I was a closed door, one he could nudge open with family warmth and vague language. I wrote back 3 words. "Sure, let's talk." I picked the diner on Main Street, courthouse regulars, a pie case by the register. Public, on purpose. I wanted this conversation somewhere Colt couldn't raise his voice, even if he wanted to. Somewhere I could watch his face in good light. I ordered coffee. He ordered coffee and a slice of pie he didn't touch. That told me more than anything he said. "So," he said, stirring sugar into a cup he wasn't drinking either. "Mom probably mentioned the situation with the house." "She mentioned a letter," I said, "about a default." Colt waved a hand. "Easy. The same wave he's used on every hard question since we were kids. It's nothing, honestly. Cash flow thing. 3 properties moving at once. Timing on Beecham Street got pushed. Just a lot of moving parts." "Sounds stressful," I said. I meant it. I wasn't performing sympathy. I felt some, watching him talk in circles. The way people do when they're standing on ground they suspect is thinner than they're letting on. "It is," he said. For 1 second, something in his face slipped. Almost the boy who let the air out of my bike tires, because he didn't know another way to say he was scared of losing. "I just need a little room, a short-term thing. You've got the business doing well. Family helps family, right?" "What kind of room?" I said. 15, 20,000, he said. "Just to clear the roofer thing. Buy a few more months on Beecham Street. I'll pay you back the second it sells." I looked at my brother across that table. I thought about $18,000, owed to a contractor who'd done honest work and gotten nothing. I thought about $310,000, sitting in default against a house that wasn't his to gamble with. I thought about a folder, locked in my desk drawer 3 blocks away. It already held every answer to every question he was too proud to ask directly. "I'll think about it," I said. That was true. I did think about it on the walk to my car, very clearly. I was not going to give my brother $20,000 to patch one leak in a boat with 4 holes in it. But I wasn't ready yet, not that afternoon, to tell him what I actually held. Ellen gave me one more piece before I left her office that week. The piece that told me exactly when and how this needed to come out. "There's a hearing," she said. "Not a big one. The roofer's suit against Colt's business, the mechanic's lien in London, set for 6 weeks out in circuit court. Small claims track, but public record. Knowing your brother, half the family will hear about it before the ink's dry." 6 weeks. I did the math without even trying. That put the hearing right around the date my parents had already circled. A second family dinner. Smaller this time, just to check in on everybody before the holidays, my mother had said. The voice she uses when something's bothering her, and she hasn't found the words yet. I didn't choose that timing. I didn't stage a courtroom and a dinner table to collide on purpose. Life did that on its own. It tends to, when enough people are making the same mistake at the same time. What I chose was simpler. I chose to be ready when it did. I want to back up for a moment. There's a piece of that closing I haven't told you yet. It matters to understanding how careful I had to be. Buying a distressed note isn't as simple as writing a check. Ellen walked me through it, step by step, in the weeks before the closing. I want to share some of that. I think it's the part of this story people assume happened by luck. It happened because I asked the right questions, in the right order, the same way I do with every client's tangled finances. "You'll need to qualify as a buyer," Ellen told me, the first week. "The workout desk won't hand a defaulted note to just anyone with cash. They'll want to see you can service the position if the borrower stays in default. Proof of funds, clean credit, some proof you understand what you're buying." "What happens if I qualify?" I said. "Then you sign a purchase agreement with the desk," she said. "Not your parents, not Colt, the bank's distressed asset unit. Same way anyone buys a defaulted note anywhere in the country. You pay the agreed price. The assignment gets executed and recorded at the county. From that day forward, you're the one collecting payments. You're the one with the right to enforce it if it stays unpaid." "And if I never call the note due," I said, "if I just quietly hold it, let my parents keep paying whatever they can?" "Then you're simply a very patient private lender," Ellen said. "Nothing unusual about that. Family members buy each other's debt more often than people realize. It just usually happens quietly. That's exactly why nobody hears about it, until a moment like the one you're building toward." I sat with that phrase a long time after I left her office. A moment like the one you're building toward. I hadn't said out loud, not even to Ellen, exactly what I intended to do with the note once I held it. I think she understood anyway. Small-town bankers generally do. The proof of funds took the better part of 2 weeks. I wasn't going to walk into that closing with anything less than a spotless file. I pulled 3 years of tax returns for Reyes Ledger Services. I documented the line of credit Ellen structured. Every term spelled out in writing. Nothing verbal, nothing assumed. My own accountant reviewed every document before I signed a single page. Even accountants hire accountants for exactly this kind of thing. "You're being more careful with this than most of my clients are with a house purchase," Harold Voss told me. He's kept my books 6 years. "Quiet man. This is a house purchase," I told him. "It just happens to be the house I grew up in." He didn't ask any more questions after that. Harold understands some numbers carry weight beyond the decimal point. He just nodded and kept working. The day the workout desk approved me wasn't dramatic either, though I remember it clearly. An email arrived on a Wednesday morning from a woman named Patricia Delgado at the desk in Lexington, 3 lines long. My file had been reviewed and approved. Closing could be scheduled as early as the following week. I read that email 4 times at my desk. The same way I'd later read Colt's text about coffee. Something settled in my chest. The particular relief of watching a plan that could have failed a dozen ways finally clear its last real obstacle. I said my grandmother's name out loud that morning. alone in my office. Not something I generally do. I don't talk to empty rooms as a rule, but I said it anyway. "Thank you, Opal," I said to the framed photograph on my wall, to the ledger book under her arm, to 40 years of careful numbers spent teaching a granddaughter to trust her own eye. There's something else, too, that matters to who I am in this story. There was a moment in that 2-week stretch when I almost stopped. A Sunday evening, sitting at my kitchen table, the purchase agreement spread out in front of me, 11 pages, read through for the third time. I thought, suddenly and clearly, about what it would mean if this went wrong. If Colt found out early, turned it into a fight before I ever reached the closing table. If my parents saw it, prematurely, as betrayal instead of rescue. If this whole careful plan collapsed into exactly the kind of loud, messy conflict I'd built my life around avoiding. I called Marjorie that night. I hadn't told her the details yet, just that I was working through something difficult and needed to talk it through with someone who wouldn't panic. "Tell me the worst thing that happens if you go through with it," she said. Once I'd laid out the shape of it, no specific numbers. "Colt hates me," I said. "My parents feel betrayed instead of protected. I spend money I've worked 11 years for. It doesn't fix anything. I end up the villain in a story where I was trying to be the opposite. And the worst thing that happens if you don't," Marjorie said. I sat with that question longer than I wanted to. "They lose the house," I said finally. "A stranger from Lexington ends up holding the note instead of me. If Colt's flips keep failing, and they will, I've seen the numbers. No guarantee a stranger extends the same patience to two people in their late 60s that a daughter would." "Then I think you already know which risk you can live with," Marjorie said, "and which one you can't." She was right, the way she generally is. I signed the closing documents that Thursday. I never once looked back at that decision again. Not through the courtroom, not through the dinner, not through any of it. Once I'd sat with the worst version of both outcomes, the choice had never really been close. I want to tell you about the 4 weeks between that diner conversation and the hearing. Telling a story backward makes it sound tidy, like I sat perfectly still and waited. That isn't how those 4 weeks felt. They felt like holding my breath in a room where everyone else kept talking. My mother called twice a week now. Not once. She'd stopped calling Colt's situation settled. She started mentioning it the way you mention a headache that won't quite go. "He says it's under control," she told me one Sunday. "He just seems tired lately." He should be tired, I thought, and did not say. "He's holding up 3 houses with one arm." I kept my own counsel. That's a phrase my grandmother used. I understood it now, the way I hadn't at 15, watching her close the hardware store's books. It doesn't mean silence out of fear. It means you don't spend your ammunition before you're standing where it counts. I told one person, though, "I want you to know about her. She's the reason I didn't do this alone, even if it looked that way from the outside. Her name is Marjorie Coyle, 81 years old. She's lived 2 doors down from me on Willow Lane since before I bought the house. Marjorie taught high school English for 39 years. She has a quality some retired teachers keep. She listens to you say something, then hands it back slightly clearer than you gave it to her. I told her everything on a Thursday evening. Sweet tea on her porch. I needed to say it out loud to someone who wasn't going to try to fix it, or panic, or ask me to protect Colt. "He called you the accountant, like it was an insult," Marjorie said when I finished. "At a party his parents' money was paying for. In a house that isn't even structurally his family's anymore. Not the way he thinks. That's the shape of it," I said. "Well," she said, and sipped her tea, looking out at the ridge. "Some people mistake noise for strength, and quiet for weakness. It takes them a long time to learn otherwise. Some never do. I didn't say anything for a moment. You didn't take anything from him, Marjorie said. You bought a debt at a fair price. From a bank that was going to sell it to a stranger otherwise. That's not a scheme, Dana. That's Tuesday. For anyone with the sense to see the opportunity and the nerve to act. That conversation didn't change my plan. Not really. What it changed was quieter. It let me stop wondering, alone at my kitchen table at night, whether what I was doing made me cold. Marjorie has a way of setting a thing down where you can see all its sides. Once I saw all the sides of this one, I slept easier. The second thing that happened stung more than I expected. I ran into Colt's wife, Brienne, at the grocery store. Brienne's always been friendly to me. The careful way people are friendly to a sister-in-law they've decided is a little odd. We stood by the produce. She asked how the business was doing. I said fine. Then she said something that told me exactly what story Colt had been telling at home. Colt says you're doing okay for yourself, she said, picking through a bin of avocados. He worries about you sometimes, actually. Says you work too much. Don't really have much else going on. He said maybe once things settle down with his properties, he could help you find a nice guy. Once he's not so slammed. I stood there holding a bag of oranges. I let that land the way you let a splinter settle, before deciding whether it's worth digging out in public. That's kind of him, I said. Tell him I appreciate the thought. That cost me something. It stung. Not because I need a man to feel complete. That's a tired old idea I never subscribed to. It stung because my brother had spare confidence left over to worry about my love life. This while he was 4 months delinquent on a loan he'd hidden from our parents, quietly trying to refinance behind their backs, out loud, to his wife. He had time to pity me. He didn't have time to check a public record that would have told him exactly who he was gambling against. I drove home and didn't cry. I don't. Instead, I did something almost funny if you have the stomach for that kind of humor. I took out the folder. I reread the recorded assignment. Reyes Ledger Services, holder of record. I looked at my own name on that document. I thought, well, Colt, I suppose I really have been busy. 3 weeks before the hearing, my mother called again. This time her voice had lost the worried thread. It had picked up something closer to panic. The bank called, she said, about the refinance. They said there's already a lien or a note. Something. I don't understand the language. They can't do anything until it's resolved. Colt said it must be a clerical error. But Dana, I don't like the way he said it. He didn't sound sure. He wouldn't sound sure, I thought. He'd just learned someone beat him to his own family's house. He had no idea it was me. Don't worry about it, Mom, I said. I meant every word, in a way she couldn't have understood yet. I'll take care of it. You will? She said. So much relief in her voice, it nearly undid my resolve to wait 3 more weeks. Oh, Dana, I knew I could count on you. You have always been able to count on me, I thought. That's never been the question. The question was whether anyone would notice. I didn't tell her more that call. I let her believe, a little longer, that her daughter was going to make a phone call and smooth something over. The way I always had, with overdraft fees and forgotten timeshares. Some part of me wanted her to have that comfort a few more weeks, before the fuller truth arrived, before she had to hold both things at once, that her son had put everything at risk, and that her daughter had already fixed it, months before anyone thought to ask. 2 weeks before the hearing, I got a call from a man named Wendell Pruitt, the roofing contractor from London, Kentucky. I'd never met him. He'd gotten my number from Ellen Marsh. She'd mentioned, in a conversation I hadn't asked her to have, that I might be a useful person for him to speak to. I wanted on the record that I hadn't planned this call. Ellen hadn't overstepped anything confidential. She'd simply told a man owed $18,000 honest money that a private note holder understood exactly how these things worked. Someone connected to the Whitfield family. That's not a betrayal of privacy. That's a banker doing what a good small-town banker does, occasionally pointing two honest people toward each other. I don't want trouble, Wendell told me. I just want what I'm owed. $18,040. Materials and labor, that London property. I've sent 3 letters. Nothing back but silence. I understand completely, I said. I can't pay another man's debt for him, Mr. Pruitt. Wouldn't offer to if I could. But the hearing in 2 weeks is a matter of public record. I intend to be there. Why? He said. Not unkindly, just curious. Because I hold the note on a property connected to the same family, I said. I think it's time everyone in that family understood how connected their debts really are. He was quiet a moment. You're the sister, he said. The one he mentioned owed him nothing but grief. I want to tell you I felt something sharp hearing that. I did. Owed him nothing but grief. From a man who'd borrowed against our parents' whole life and told no one. I kept my voice level because that's the only voice I've got. I suppose we'll both find out what's owed to who, Mr. Pruitt, I said. I'll see you at the courthouse. I hung up the phone. I sat in my office on Depot Street. For the first time since that Tuesday, 6 weeks after the anniversary dinner, I let myself feel something close to anticipation. Not triumph. Not yet. Just the quiet satisfaction of watching a column of numbers, checked 17 times, finally line up. Exactly the way you always knew they would, if you were patient enough, accurate enough to let them. The hearing was set for a Tuesday morning, the 10th of the month, Laurel County Circuit Court, small claims track, courtroom 2. My mother's second family dinner was set for that Saturday, 4 days later, at the house on Persimmon Ridge Road, to check in before the holidays. I didn't plan those 2 dates to sit that close together. I want to say that again, because it matters. I didn't need to plan it. All I needed was to show up to the first one quietly, a private citizen with a legitimate financial interest in the outcome, and let its plain facts travel, the way facts in a small town always do, faster and further than any one person could carry them on purpose. There's one more thing from those 4 weeks. It's small, I almost left it out. Then I decided the whole truth deserves the small parts too. My father showed up at my office unannounced, a Wednesday afternoon, about 10 days before the hearing. He'd never done that before, in 11 years running Reyes Ledger Services. He stood in the doorway a moment, looking unsure if he was allowed in. Strange, in a room he'd helped me pick the paint color for. Got a minute? He said. Always, Dad, I said. I meant it. He sat in the client chair, the same one Ruben Castillo sits in, the one Colt would sit in 11 weeks later with his duffel bag of receipts. He looked around my office slowly, the filing cabinet, the framed photo of Opal, the capped washer hookups under the floor, the ones he'd once joked I should really tear out. Your mother's worried, he said, about Colt. About the letter. She thinks I don't notice how worried she is. 42 years married, I notice. I know, Dad, I said. I wanted to ask you something, he said. I want an honest answer, not the answer you think I want to hear. Okay, I said. Is our house actually at risk? He said. Right now. Today. Not eventually. Today. I looked at my father, 68 years old, sitting in a client chair in a converted laundromat, asking his daughter a question he probably should have been able to ask his son. I made a decision in that moment I still stand by completely. No, I said. It's not at risk today, Dad. I promise you that. I can't tell you everything yet. I'm still gathering the full picture. But I can tell you the house itself, the actual roof over your head, is safe. I wouldn't let anything happen to that. Not while I have a say in it." He studied my face a long moment, the way he used to study a piece of lumber before letting a student near it with a saw, checking the grain, checking for a hidden crack that might split wrong under pressure. "You have a say in it," he said. Not quite a question. "I have more of a say than you know yet," I said. "I promise, Dad. You'll understand everything soon. I just need a little more time to make sure it's airtight before I bring it to you and Mom." He nodded slowly. Something in his shoulders eased, just slightly. The particular ease of a man who spent his whole life trusting that if his daughter says a thing is handled, it is. "Your grandmother used to say you had her eye," he said, standing to leave. "I always thought that just meant you were good with numbers. I'm starting to think it meant something bigger." He left before I could answer. Probably for the best. I'm not sure I had an answer ready yet. Not one I could say out loud without giving away more than I was prepared to. That Wednesday. I want to tell you what that visit did for me. It mattered more than I let on. For 6 weeks, I'd carried this entirely alone. The folder, the numbers, the growing certainty of what I'd have to say and when. Not one member of my own family knew I was carrying anything at all. My father's visit was the first crack of light through that. Not because he knew the truth, because he trusted me enough to ask the only question that mattered to him and accept my answer without demanding the rest. That's a kind of faith not everyone gets from a parent. I didn't take it lightly. I went home that night and reread the closing documents once more, the 11th or 12th time by then. Not because I doubted them, because my father had just placed something valuable in my hands without asking to see inside it first. I wanted to be certain I deserved that trust before Saturday came. The days that followed moved slower than I expected. I kept working. I caught another discrepancy in a different client's books. A construction company overpaying a supplier by nearly $900 a month for 6 months running. A duplicate invoice nobody had caught. Even in the middle of everything with Colt, that catch still felt satisfying. Plain and quiet, the way it always does. Some things don't stop mattering just because a bigger thing is happening around them. I drove past the house on Persimmon Ridge Road twice that week, on my way to other errands, slowing down without meaning to, looking at the porch light my father always leaves on, the one that's burned every night since I was small. Both times I felt the same thing. Not dread, exactly. Something closer to readiness. The particular calm of a woman who's checked her numbers enough times to trust them completely, waiting only for the moment they need to be spoken out loud. Courtroom 2 at Laurel County Circuit Court smells like every courtroom I've ever sat in. Old wood, cold coffee, a little nervous sweat, worn into the benches over decades of other people's worst mornings. I got there 15 minutes early. Gray suit, the one I wear to every important client meeting. I've never believed in dressing differently just because a morning happens to matter more. Wendell Pruitt was already there, a folder of his own, 50s, a sunburned neck, hands that have held a nail gun more hours than a pen. He nodded at me. I nodded back. Colt came in at 3 minutes to 9, a blazer he doesn't usually wear. A lawyer beside him, Grady Sims, a young attorney out of London who mostly handles closings. Colt didn't see me at first. He was talking low and fast to Grady, the kind of talking a person does when the story they've been telling themselves doesn't sound quite as solid out loud. Then he saw me. I watched his face move through something fast. First, confusion, then something close to relief, the reflexive kind, the kind that assumes family shows up for family no matter what. He actually started to smile at me. I didn't smile back. I just held his eyes, calm, the way I hold a client's eyes right before I tell them their numbers don't work. I watched the relief curdle into a question. The judge was a woman named Constance Okafor, 60-something, reading glasses low on her nose, the kind of judge who's heard every excuse a small claims docket can produce. She called the case Pruitt Roofing and Restoration versus Whitfield Property Solutions, LLC. Wendell stood. Colt stood. Grady Sims stood beside him. I'm not going to walk you through every minute. Most of it was exactly what you'd expect. Wendell's attorney, Patricia Combs, laid out the invoice, the signed work order, 3 unanswered letters, $18,040 for a full roof tear-off and replacement. Grady Sims tried, gently, to suggest the amount was in dispute. Materials substituted without written approval, he said. That claim fell apart in about 90 seconds once Patricia Combs produced Colt's own text messages, approving each substitution in real time. Judge Okafor did not enjoy having her time wasted. Mr. Whitfield, she said at one point, do you dispute that this work was performed? No, Your Honor, Colt said. Do you dispute the amount invoiced? A pause. Not substantially, Your Honor. Then what exactly are we doing here today? I watched my brother's shoulders drop half an inch, the way shoulders drop when a room stops being on your side. I've had some cash flow difficulties, Your Honor. I intend to pay Mr. Pruitt in full. I've just needed time to arrange financing. How much time? Judge Okafor said. I was hoping to refinance a property to cover it, Colt said. That process has hit a delay. What kind of delay? She said. Notice this. This is the moment the story turned. It turned on a question the judge asked for her own reasons. Nothing to do with me at all. Colt hesitated. There's a note on the collateral property that needs resolving first. It's a family matter. I'm working it out. A family matter, Judge Okafor repeated. Something in her tone told me she'd heard that phrase excuse a debt more times than she cared to count. Mr. Whitfield, is the note in question currently in default? I watched Grady Sims lean in and murmur something. I watched Colt's jaw tighten. It's in the process of being resolved, Colt said. That's not what I asked you. There was a silence in that courtroom I will remember the rest of my life. Not dramatic, the way a television courtroom is dramatic. Plain, unadorned. Exactly what a silence sounds like when a person finally has to answer a question they've spent months avoiding. Yes, Your Honor, Colt said. It's in default. I didn't stand up. I didn't say a word. I hadn't come to detonate anything. I'd come because I had a legitimate financial interest in that very default. I'd told a grieving contractor named Wendell Pruitt I would show up, and I keep my word. What happened next happened because Patricia Combs was doing her job. She asked the one follow-up question a good attorney asks when a witness admits a default under oath. Your Honor, if I may, she said. Mr. Whitfield has now testified under oath that a note secured against real property is in active default. That default is directly relevant to his stated inability to satisfy my client's judgment. I'd ask the court's permission to have the record reflect the current holder of that note. Judge Okafor nodded. Mr. Whitfield, who holds the note in question? First Ridge Bank, Colt said. Or they did. I believe it's been sold to a workout desk. Sold to whom? I watched my brother's face for the exact second it happened. The second his own memory caught up with a fact he'd never bothered to check. For a moment, he looked like a man trying to recall a name he'd never actually learned. I don't know, he said. I haven't had a chance to confirm the new holder. That was the moment I stood up. I didn't stand up to embarrass him. I stood up because a court reporter sat there, ready to write down whatever answer got given. I was not going to let an inaccurate one go into a public record I might need someday. Your Honor, I said, if it assists the court, I can confirm the current holder of record. Every head in that courtroom turned. Colt turned slowest of all. When he did, he actually looked at me, standing there in my gray suit, folder under my arm. I watched the last piece of confusion drain out of his face. Something colder moved in behind it. And you are, Judge Okafor said. Dana Whitfield Reyes, Your Honor. I run Reyes Ledger Services in Corbin Falls. I'm Mr. Whitfield's sister. A small stir moved through the room, the kind a small-town courtroom produces when a fact lands that everyone present will be repeating by supper. And your interest in this matter, Judge Okafor said. I hold the note, Your Honor, I said. I purchased the assignment from First Ridge Bank's distressed debt desk 6 weeks ago, fully within the applicable regulations. I have the recorded documentation with me, if the court would like to see it. I've turned my brother's face over in memory more times than any other second of this whole story. It wasn't rage, not at first, not even disbelief. It was the particular blankness of a man doing fast arithmetic he should have done 6 weeks earlier, arriving, in real time, at an answer he didn't like. That's not possible, he said quietly, more to himself than the room. It's quite possible, Judge Okafor said, mild as ever, already reaching for the recorded assignment I'd handed the bailiff. It appears to be a matter of public record, Mr. Whitfield. Perhaps you should have checked. I sat back down. I didn't say anything more. Nothing more needed saying in that room. Not that day. Judge Okafor entered a judgment for Wendell Pruitt. $18,040 plus court costs. 30 days to satisfy it. Then she moved on to the next case. Because that's what small claims courtrooms do. They move on, whether or not the person walking out the door has had their whole understanding of their own life quietly rearranged in 9 minutes. Wendell Pruitt shook my hand on the courthouse steps. The cold made his sunburned neck look almost raw. He held onto my hand a beat longer than a normal handshake, the way people do when they're deciding whether to say something else. Didn't expect that, he said. Neither did he, I said. You could have stayed quiet, Wendell said. Let the judge sort her own paperwork. Wasn't your fight, not really. It became my fight the day my brother stopped paying on a house that isn't his, I said. I just happened to be sitting close enough to say so out loud. He nodded slowly, the way a man nods when a sentence lands somewhere true. Well, he said, appreciate you showing up anyway. I told you I would, I said. I keep my word, Mr. Pruitt. That's really the whole of it. Colt didn't come near me. He walked straight to his truck, Grady Sims trailing behind, talking fast again. I watched him drive off without once looking back. I understood, watching him go, the story wasn't over. It was just about to move to the one place he couldn't avoid me. My phone rang 40 minutes later. My mother. Dana, she said. Her voice had a flatness I'd never heard from her before. Your brother just called me. He said something happened at his hearing today. He said you were there. He said you're the one who bought some kind of loan on our house. I sat in my car outside the courthouse a moment before I answered. I did, I said. I'll explain everything Saturday, Mom. I promise. I'm not trying to hurt anyone. I'm trying to fix something Colt should have told you a long time ago. A long silence on the line. Saturday, my mother said finally. Her voice had gone very quiet. At dinner. At dinner, I said. She didn't ask me anything else. I think some part of her already understood that whatever was coming Saturday was bigger than a phone call could hold. I think some other part of her already suspected something else, too. The part that had handed me grocery bags of receipts every spring for a decade. If her daughter was the one holding the pieces, they were probably going to fit. News travels fast in Corbin Falls. Here's exactly how fast, because it matters to what Saturday became before Saturday even arrived. By Tuesday evening, Aunt Renee had called me twice, fishing for details I didn't give her. By Wednesday, my cousin Todd, who works at the courthouse annex doing land records, mentioned something to his mother. He'd heard Dana Reyes is some kind of big note holder now. Not exactly what happened, close enough that I didn't bother correcting it. By Thursday, my father called me directly. First time in this whole 6-week stretch. That told me more than anything Renee or Todd could relay. Dana, he said, and his voice had none of my mother's panic in it. My father has always processed hard things slower and steadier, the same way he'd walk a student through a table saw safety lesson twice before letting them near the blade. Your mother tells me you're the one who bought the note on the house. I am? I said. Why didn't you tell us? I sat with that question for a moment because it deserved a real answer, not a defensive one. Because I needed to understand the whole situation before I said anything, I said. Not just the mortgage, Colt's other properties, how deep it went. If I'd come to you with half the picture 6 weeks ago, it would have turned into an argument about whether I was overreacting. Colt would have had time to talk his way around it. I didn't want an argument, Dad. I wanted it fixed. There was a long pause on the line. I could hear the television in the background, the evening news, the particular hum of a kitchen he's stood in every night for 40 years. Is the house safe? He said finally. That was the only question that actually mattered to him, and I loved him for asking it plainly. The house is safe, I said. It's safe because I hold the note now. Not a stranger from Lexington who wouldn't have cared whether you and Mom ever missed a payment. I'm not going to foreclose on you, Dad. I bought that note to protect the house, not to take it. Then what happens now? He said. Now we have dinner Saturday, I said, and I tell you and Mom everything, all of it. And then we decide, together, what happens to Colt's situation from here. He was quiet again, and then he said something I've turned over in my mind more than almost anything else in this story. Your grandmother would be proud of you, he said. She always said you had her eye for numbers. I don't think any of us understood, until just now, what that eye could actually see. I didn't cry on that call either, but I sat in my office a long while after we hung up, looking at the framed photograph of Opal in front of the hardware store. I let myself feel, for just a moment, something I'd kept folded very small for 6 weeks. Not vindication, something quieter, something closer to being finally, fully seen by the one parent who still had room left to see me differently. Colt called me too, that same week on Friday night, the evening before the dinner. I almost didn't answer. I did, because I don't run from things, even uncomfortable ones, and because some part of me suspected this call mattered. You could have just told me, he said. No hello, straight into it. His voice had an edge I'd never heard him use with me before, not even the year I beat him in the spelling bee. Told you what, exactly, I said. That I bought the note protecting Mom and Dad's house from your default? Or that I knew and let you keep trying to refinance a house you didn't legally control? So you'd finally have to explain it to someone who wasn't me. You embarrassed me in front of a judge, Dana. In front of Wendell Pruitt. That'll be all over town by Sunday. You embarrassed yourself in front of a judge, Colt, I said. I said it calmly, the way I say most things. Raising my voice has never once made a true sentence more true. I just happened to be sitting in the room when it caught up with you. You've always thought you were better than me, he said. Smarter, more responsible, the good one. I never thought I was better than you, I said. And this part I meant more than almost anything I'd said in 6 weeks. I thought I was invisible to you. There's a difference, Colt. I spent a decade balancing mom and dad's checkbook for free. You spent that same decade building a life that looked good from the outside, rotting underneath it. Neither of us ever really saw the other one clearly, until now. He didn't have an answer for that. I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line, and for 1 second, I thought he might actually say something honest. "I need help, Dana," he said finally, quiet now, all the edge gone out of it. Not just the roofer. Everything. Somerset. Beecham Street. "I don't know how to fix this. I want to tell you I felt triumphant, hearing my brother finally say those 5 words, after 6 weeks of watching him drown in silence. I didn't. I felt something more like grief. The specific grief of watching someone you love finally tell the truth. 4 months too late to make it easy. "I know," I said. "That's what tomorrow's for." "What does that mean?" he said. "It means come to dinner," I said, "and find out." I hung up the phone and sat in the dark for a long time. There's one more conversation from that week worth telling. It belongs right alongside the calls from my father and from Colt. My mother called me back on Saturday morning, the day of the dinner, a few hours before I was set to drive up Persimmon Ridge Road. "I found something," she said. Her voice had a strange, careful quality, like she was handling a piece of glass she wasn't sure had already cracked. "In your grandmother's old recipe box. I was looking for the pot roast card. I found a folded piece of paper tucked behind it. I think it's meant for you." "What does it say?" I said. "I didn't read it," my mother said. "It has your name on the outside." "I only opened the recipe box, Dana. I wouldn't open something with your name on it." She drove it over to my office that same morning. That surprised me. My mother rarely comes to Depot Street unannounced. She set a small yellowed envelope on my desk, my name written across the front, in Opal's unmistakable hand, the same slanted cursive she used for inventory totals at the hardware store. I opened it after she left. Inside was a single index card, the kind Opal used for recipes. This one had no recipe on it at all. Just a short note, dated 11 years before her death, long before I ever imagined I'd need any of what it said. "Dana, if you're reading this, you finally needed the money, which means someone in this family finally needed you to have it. You always had the eye. Your mother and father are good people who never learned to count what they had until it was almost gone. Don't let them make you feel small for seeing clearly. The gift was never the numbers. The gift was that you never once looked away from them. Love, Grandma Opal." I read that card 4 times, the same way I'd read the approval email, the same way I'd read Colt's text message. That's apparently just how I process the moments that matter most. Careful repetition until the words finally settle somewhere permanent. I want to tell you honestly, I did cry then, alone in my office, the card in my hands, the framed photograph of Opal watching from the wall. I don't think that contradicts anything I've told you about who I am. I don't cry in front of people. I've built a life around that discipline, and I don't regret it. But alone, with my grandmother's handwriting in my hands, 11 years after she wrote it, 4 years after she died, I let myself feel every bit of it. I brought that card with me to dinner that evening, tucked inside the folder, behind the recorded assignment and Ellen's default notice. I never took it out at the table. Some things aren't for an audience. Even a family audience gathered for exactly the reason that card existed. I kept it close, though, the whole evening, the way you keep something that reminds you why you're doing a hard thing in the first place. Here's what I thought, sitting in my car outside my parents' house that evening. It's the most honest window into where my head actually was. More honest than anything I said out loud at that table. I thought about Opal, 11 years earlier. sitting somewhere with a recipe box and an index card, already imagining a version of her family falling short of each other in exactly this way. I thought about how she must have known. The way people who've kept careful books for 40 years always seem to know that a family which never learns to count what it has will eventually lose track of who's actually holding it up. I thought about the phrase she used, "You never once looked away from them." Sitting there in the cold, I realized this was the truest thing anyone had ever said about me. Truer even than the practical one, truer than still playing accountant. I hadn't looked away from a single number in this whole story. Not the $61.40 in Ruben Castillo's shoebox. Not the $310,000 against my parents' house. Not the $882,000 across Colt's 4 properties. I had looked at every hard number, every time, when everyone else in my family had spent years choosing not to. That's not a superpower, it's just a habit, built slowly, out of a childhood spent being told my attention to detail was small, until it turned out to be the only thing standing between my parents and losing their home. I got out of the car. I walked up the same steps I'd walked up my whole life. I carried the folder. Inside it, tucked where no one else would see, I carried Opal's card, too. Whatever happened next at that table, I walked in already feeling like I'd won the only thing that had ever actually mattered to me. Not the house, not the money, just finally being seen by the one person whose voice I still carried with me, even after everything. Saturday came in gray and cold. The kind of October afternoon where the ridge behind my parents' house looks dipped in ash. I drove up Persimmon Ridge Road at 5 in the evening, same road I'd driven my whole life, past the Hendersons' mailbox shaped like a barn, past the dented guardrail nobody's fixed since 2011. I parked in the same gravel spot I've parked in since I got my license. I brought the folder. Picture it plainly. Nothing theatrical about it. A manila folder, worn at the corners now. The recorded assignment, Ellen's default notice, the county's second mortgage filing, a printed summary of Colt's 3 properties, typed up myself. The way I'd type a summary for any client who needed the whole picture on one page. My mother met me at the door. She'd lost weight in 6 weeks. Or maybe I was only now looking closely enough to notice. She hugged me the way she hugs me at every family gathering. Quick, a little formal. Then she held on a second longer than usual. I understood that second the way you understand a client tearing up over a number that finally makes sense. "Everyone's here," she said quietly. "Aunt Renee, Uncle Marv, Colt and Brienne. Your father's in the kitchen. 11 people. Same as the anniversary dinner." I noticed that, walking in. The same table, the same chairs. Colt sat at the head, where he'd stood to give his toast 6 weeks earlier. When he saw me come in with the folder, he didn't smile this time. We sat down to eat. For the first 20 minutes, it was almost normal. My mother had made her pot roast, the one she's made every family dinner since I was a child. Uncle Marv told a long story about a fishing trip that went nowhere in particular. Aunt Renee kept glancing at me across the table, the barely restrained energy of a woman who already knew more than she should, dying to see it confirmed. It was my father who finally set his fork down. "Dana," he said, "I think it's time." I set my own fork down. I felt 11 pairs of eyes turn toward me, the same 11 who'd laughed at Colt's toast 6 weeks earlier. I want to tell you, honestly, my hands did not shake. They hadn't shaken in a courtroom 4 days earlier either. I've built my whole life around exactly that kind of steadiness. "Okay," I said. "I'll tell it in order. It's the only way it makes sense." I opened the folder. 14 months ago, I said, Colt asked Mom and Dad to co-sign a second mortgage on this house. $310,000. He told you it was a 90-day bridge loan to get him through closing on Beecham Street. He signed as guarantor. That means he promised the bank he'd cover it if it ever went sideways. That's between me and the bank, Dana, Colt said, low. But the table had already gone still. It stopped being between you and the bank 4 months ago, I said, when you stopped paying, when the loan went into default, when you told Mom as recently as 3 weeks ago that you were handling it. My mother made a small sound, not quite a word. My father didn't move at all. He was watching Colt now, not me. That was the moment, I think, Colt actually felt the floor shift. Not in a courtroom, in front of strangers, at his own family's table, in front of the people whose good opinion he'd built his whole identity on. I was handling it, Colt said. I still am. You're not, I said. I laid the recorded assignment on the table, face up. I slid it toward my father. I'd pictured doing this for 6 weeks. I want to be honest. The picture in my head never once included the sound the paper made, sliding across my mother's good tablecloth. A small, dry, ordinary sound. It felt louder than anything else in the room. What is this? My father said, picking it up. Read the second paragraph, Dad, I said. Out loud, if you want to. I think everyone should hear it. He put his reading glasses on. The same half-moon glasses he's worn since I was in high school. He read it slowly, the way he reads everything. Careful, exact. A man who spent 31 years teaching kids to measure twice before they cut. This assignment transfers all right, title, and interest in the promissory note secured by the property at 118 Persimmon Ridge Road, Corbin Falls, Kentucky. He read, from First Ridge Bank to the assignee, Reyes Ledger Services, sole proprietor Dana Whitfield Reyes, holder of record, effective the date below. He stopped reading. He looked up at me, over those half-moon glasses. Then he looked at Colt. Something passed across his face I don't have a clean word for. Not anger, exactly. Closer to a man finally seeing the full shape of a wall he'd been leaning on for months without knowing it was cracked. You own the note on our house, he said to me, quietly. I bought it 6 weeks ago, I said, from the bank's distressed debt desk, at a discount because the note was already in default, heading toward a sale to a stranger. I used Grandma Opal's inheritance, my own savings, a line of credit Ellen Marsh helped me set up, all of it legal, all of it recorded at the county, the same week. I didn't do it to take anything from you and Mom. I did it because if I hadn't, someone else would have, and that someone wouldn't have cared whether you ever missed a payment. The table had gone completely silent. Even Uncle Marv, who hasn't stopped talking voluntarily since 1994, had nothing to say. You could have told us, my mother said. Her voice cracked on the word told. I felt that crack somewhere under my ribs. I love her. I never once wanted to be the one delivering this sentence to her. I know, I said. I'm sorry it took 6 weeks instead of 6 hours. But Mom, if I'd told you the day I found the mortgage, before I understood the whole picture, you'd have called Colt. Colt would have had a story ready. He always does. We'd have argued about whether I was overreacting. Nothing would have actually gotten fixed. I needed it airtight. I needed you to hear it once, all the way through, nowhere left for anyone to talk their way around it. Airtight, Colt repeated. Something ugly trying to surface in his voice now. Something that had been circling under the surface since I walked in the door. Is that what you call this? Setting up your own brother? I looked at my brother across that table. The same table where he'd mocked my little office 6 weeks earlier. For the first time all evening, I felt something close to dry wit. The kind I usually keep folded away, where nobody but Marjorie ever sees it. I didn't set anything up, Colt, I said. You put a second mortgage on Mom and Dad's house. You stopped paying it. You lied to them about handling it for 4 months, all while you tried to talk our mother into softening me up for a second loan you never planned on paying back either. I just happened to be the one accurate enough to notice. You've been sitting on this for weeks, he said, waiting to humiliate me. I've been sitting on this for weeks, I said, making sure Mom and Dad never had one single day where their house was actually at risk. I let that sit. That's the part you keep skipping over, Colt. From the moment I closed on that note, this house was never going anywhere. The only thing that changed today is that everyone finally knows why. My father set the assignment down, very carefully. The way you set down something you've decided matters more than you first realized. How much does Colt actually owe? He said. All of it, not just this house. I looked at Colt. He didn't answer. So I did. 310,000 on this house, now held by me instead of the bank. 190,000 on the Somerset duplex, 4 payments behind, to a hard money lender at 11%. 162,000 on the London house, with an $18,000 judgment against it as of Tuesday, for a roofer he never paid. 220,000 on Beecham Street, still unsold, 9 months after he told everyone 90 days. I paused. Altogether, that's roughly $882,000 of exposure, Dad, spread across 4 properties, and as far as I can tell, he hasn't made a voluntary payment on any of it in at least 4 months. The number sat in the middle of the table, like something none of us could quite pick up. $882,000, my mother said, very quietly, as if saying it out loud might make it smaller. It didn't. It just sat there, exactly as large as it actually was. The way true numbers always do, whether or not anyone in the room is ready to hold them. Brienne finally spoke, from the far end of the table, her voice small and stunned. Colt, you told me Somerset was almost sold. You told me London was just a paperwork delay. Colt didn't look at her. He was staring at the recorded assignment, still lying where our father had set it down, like a man staring at an X-ray, one that finally explains a pain he's been ignoring for months. I was going to fix it, he said, quiet now, all the edge from Friday night gone out of him completely. I always fix it. You didn't fix it, Colt, I said. You covered it. Those are different things. Fixing it would have meant telling Mom and Dad the truth 14 months ago, letting them decide, together, whether that was a risk worth taking. Covering it meant lying to them for over a year, hoping the flip sold before anyone noticed the gap. So what happens now? My father said. He was looking at me now. Not Colt. Like he already understood I was the one holding the actual answer. Now, I said, a few things happen. None of them require anyone to raise their voice. I laid out the rest, the way I've laid out plans for clients 100 times. Plain, sequential. That's the only way a bad situation gets smaller instead of bigger. First, the mortgage on this house stays exactly where it is. With me. I'm not calling the note due. I'm not raising the rate. You and Mom keep living here. I keep collecting the same payment the bank would have collected, except now it goes to someone who wants you to keep this house, instead of a bank that just wants its money back. My mother let out a breath. I think she'd been holding it since the word default first left my mouth. Second, I said, Colt's other 3 properties are his problem to solve. I'm not going to solve them for him. Neither are you, Mom and Dad. Not with money you don't have. If Colt wants my professional help, sorting through what's salvageable as a client, I'll sit down with him, go through every number, honestly, the way I would for anyone. But that's a business relationship, not a bailout. It starts with him telling the truth about every dollar, not just the ones already public. Colt's jaw worked a moment before he spoke. You'd actually help me. After all this, I never stopped being your sister, Colt, I said. I meant that as plainly as I've ever meant anything. I stopped being willing to pretend I didn't see what was happening. Those are different things, too. Third, I said, I looked at my parents for this part. It was theirs to hear most of all. The roofer's judgment against Colt's business is public record now. It isn't going away because we had a nice dinner about it. Colt has 30 days to satisfy it. Or Wendell Pruitt's attorney starts looking at available assets. That likely means the Somerset duplex. Most equity relative to debt. That's not me being cruel. That's just what happens next. Legally, whether any of us like it or not. And the second mortgage, my father said, the one Colt already can't pay. What happens to that? That one's already handled, I said. I hold it now. I'm not calling it due. I'm not foreclosing. But I want to say this clearly, in front of everyone, so there's no confusion later. I'm not doing that as a gift to Colt. I'm doing it to protect you and Mom. Specifically, your names were on that mortgage. You trusted your son with your home. You didn't deserve to lose it for that trust. Here's what happened in the silence after that. It's the part of the evening I think about most. Even now. My mother reached across the table and took my hand. Not Colt's. Mine. She held it the way she used to hold my hand crossing Main Street when I was small. Careful. A little too tight. She looked at me with an expression I had genuinely never seen on her face before. Not once. In 33 years. I've spent so long calling you the practical one, she said, like it was the smaller thing to be. I never once considered that practical was the thing that was going to save this family. I didn't cry. Some part of me wanted to, sitting there with my mother's hand around mine, at the table where I'd been mocked 6 weeks earlier for that exact same quality. But I've spent 33 years choosing stillness over tears in front of this family. I wasn't going to break that pattern on the one night it had finally paid off. You don't have to call me anything different, Mom, I said. I just needed you to see it. That's all I ever wanted, really. Not an apology. Just to be seen. Colt sat very still through all of this, staring at his plate. When he finally spoke again, his voice had lost every last trace of the edge it carried walking in the door. I'm sorry, he said, to the whole table. Though I think he meant it for me first. I should have told you all a long time ago. I was scared of how it would look. I built this whole version of myself. The guy who's got it figured out. The guy who closes deals. I didn't know how to be anything else once I started drowning. That's the part I actually understand, I said. I meant it. I've spent my whole life being the one who's supposed to be fine. Quiet. Capable. Doesn't need anything. It's its own kind of trap, Colt. Just a different shape than yours. Mine just comes with better paperwork. Nobody laughed exactly, but something in the room loosened, slightly. The first real give in 6 weeks of tension that had been building toward this one table since the night of a butter knife and a toast. My father picked the assignment back up, read it over once more, silently this time. Then he set it down. He looked at both his children in a way I don't think he'd looked at either of us in years. Your grandmother used to say something, he said, about paper, that whoever holds it holds the house. I always thought that was just an old hardware store saying. I didn't understand until tonight that she meant it exactly the way she said it. She left me the money that bought it, Dad, I said. $11,300, sitting in an account none of us remembered. I think some part of her always knew one of us would need it. Someday. For exactly this. My mother started to cry then, quietly. The good kind. Uncle Marv, of all people, broke the heaviness in the room, clearing his throat. Well, I don't know about the rest of you, he said, but this pot roast has gotten cold, and I am not letting a family crisis ruin a perfectly good pot roast. Somehow that landed exactly right. Somebody actually laughed. A small, real laugh. The first one all evening. Plates started moving again. The terrible, necessary work of that table slowly gave way to something gentler. I didn't stay long after dinner. I hugged my mother at the door. This time she held on even longer than she had at the start of the evening. My father walked me to my car, hands in his pockets against the cold. He stood there a moment before I got in. "I mean it," he said. "About your grandmother. About you. I should have said it a long time ago. I'm sorry it took almost losing this house for me to finally say it right." "You're saying it now, Dad?" I said. "That's enough." He hugged me. He doesn't do that often. A stiff, sincere shop teacher's hug. I drove home down Persimmon Ridge Road in the dark, past the dented guardrail, past the Hendersons' mailbox. The folder sat empty on the passenger seat, where the sleeping animal weight of it had finally, quietly, settled. I want to tell you what happened in the months after that dinner. A story like this doesn't actually end at the table. It moves into the slower, quieter work of what comes next. I think that part matters just as much as the reveal. Colt came to my office on Depot Street the following Tuesday. Not Brienne's idea, not our mother's, his own. He sat in the client chair across from my desk, the same chair Ruben Castillo sits in. For the first time in either of our lives, my brother handed me a shoebox. It wasn't literally a shoebox, a canvas duffel bag, full of receipts, invoices, loan statements, 3 years of bank records he'd never once organized. Organizing them would have meant looking at them. Looking at them would have meant admitting what they added up to. "I don't know where to start," he said. "You start at the beginning," I said. "Same as everyone. I want to tell you honestly, it wasn't a fast fix. I promised you the truth of this. It took 11 weeks of Tuesday afternoons to untangle Colt's 4 properties into something that made sense on paper. The Somerset duplex sold in December, at a loss, a manageable one, $16,000 under what he owed. He covered it by finally selling the boat he'd bought 2 years earlier and never once used for anything but photographs. The London property's judgment got satisfied within the 30 days the court gave him. Money from a personal loan, taken out honestly this time. A real bank. His own name. No one else's house behind it. Beacom Street sold in February. $231,000, $11,000 over what he'd paid. The first property Colt had made an honest dollar on in over a year. I think it meant more to him than a larger profit would have, 6 months earlier. He still owes me for the mortgage on Persimmon Ridge Road. He makes the payment on the first of every month, on time, into an account I set up specifically for it. There's something almost funny about that. My brother, who once called me the accountant like it was a joke, now the single most punctual client on my entire book. 11 months in, he hasn't missed a payment once. My parents are still in that house. My father still keeps his shop tools on a pegboard in the garage. Each outline traced in marker, so he always knows where a tool belongs. My mother still makes pot roast on Sundays. These days, I notice she calls it the family dinner. Not just dinner. Like the word family needs saying out loud now. The way you say a thing once you've learned you can't take it for granted. There's Wendell Pruitt, too. What happened with him matters to how this story ends. 6 weeks after Colt paid his judgment in full, Wendell called me. Out of the blue, asked if Reyes Ledger Services took new clients. His roofing business had grown past what he could track alone, he said. Ellen Marsh had mentioned, more than once, that I was the most careful set of eyes in 3 counties. I took him on, one of my best clients now, prompt with his paperwork, honest about every number, the kind of client who makes the work feel less like accounting and more like keeping faith with someone who's earned it. I never mentioned the courtroom to him again. Neither did he. Some things don't need repeating. They just need to have happened once, correctly, in front of the right people. And Marjorie deserves the last word, almost as much as anyone in this story. I brought her a bottle of good wine the week after the dinner, sat on her porch again, same two chairs, told her everything, start to finish, the courtroom, the table, my mother's hand around mine. Well, Marjorie said when I finished, looking out at the ridge the way she does, I believe I told you. Quiet isn't weakness. It just takes people longer to notice the difference. You did tell me that, I said. I generally am right, she said, though I try not to say so more than once a week, for the sake of my own humility. I laughed, actually laughed, out loud. The first real laugh I remember having in the whole 6 weeks that story took to unfold. Marjorie smiled the small, satisfied smile of a woman who's spent 39 years watching young people finally understand something she's known for decades. I want to tell you one more thing, then I'll let this rest. A few months after the dinner, I drove up to Whitfield Hardware. It isn't Whitfield Hardware anymore. Hasn't been since my grandmother sold it in the 90s. But the building's still there on Main Street, a hardware store under a different name now. The new owners kept the original brick facade because tearing it down cost more than they wanted to spend. I stood outside it a moment, the way I sometimes do when I need to remember something plainly. I thought about a 7-year-old girl on a wooden stool, licking her thumb before she turned a ledger page, being told her numbers were a gift. I thought about the folder Opal left me. 6 words on the envelope. For when you need it. I'd spent every dollar of that $11,300. It was the smartest money either of us ever spent. It didn't just buy a note on a house. It bought my whole family a chance to see each other clearly, maybe for the first time in 33 years. I still run Reyes Ledger Services out of that converted laundromat on Depot Street. The washer hookups are still capped under the floor. The framed photograph of Opal still watches over my desk, ledger book under her arm, like it's a Bible. In a certain way, in my family, it always has been. I don't get loud. I never have. I get accurate. I let accurate do the rest of the talking. Last week, a new client sat down across from me with a shoebox of receipts, embarrassed, the way most of them are. I told her the same thing I've told every one of them for 11 years. Don't worry, I said. I'm not here to make you feel small for not knowing. I'm here to make sure the truth gets counted correctly. She smiled, relieved, the way they always are. I got to work. The folder open, the numbers waiting, patient and exact. My mother called that same evening, just to talk the way she does now, every week. No letter, no crisis, just her voice on the line, asking how my day went. I told her about the new client. She told me about the tomatoes in her garden, still holding on past the first frost warning. Neither of us mentioned the note, or the dinner, or the folder that started it. Some things, once they're finally counted right, don't need repeating. I locked my office at 6 that evening. Walked out to my car under a sky going gray at the edges. I thought one more time of my grandmother's voice. Whoever holds the paper holds the house. I locked the door behind me and drove home.